Welcome back into the Lions 24/7 podcast. I am Tyler Donahue. We've got a lot to break down on this latest episode. Thanks for joining us, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening via one of the many podcast platforms. We appreciate you each and every episode for joining us as part of this conversation as the Nittany Lions continue to evolve through the transfer portal. Earlier this week, Tyler Calvaruso joined me to break down a ton of the latest pickups for Penn State, along with some of the departures, and we try to put the pieces together at several positions about where things are trending 2 months ahead of Penn State spring practices and ultimately what this team might look like in 2026. As we've covered, there's been so much change since James Franklin was fired, since the season ended in the Bronx a few weeks ago. We have seen more than 40 players enter the transfer portal, more than 30 players come in through the transfer portal, not all of which are on campus yet, but they will be progressively coming to campus over the next several months. But we have a lot to break down when it comes to just the Iowa State piece of the transfer portal class, because as we anticipated, many of the top players from Ames have followed Matt Campbell and much of his staff over the recent weeks, especially with the transfer portal opening up. And we're going to break down a big part of that group right now with Alec Bussey, who covers Iowa State for the 24/7 Sports Network. You may remember Alec from earlier on in the Matt Campbell era. Just a couple of days into it, we had him on to break down a lot of what Campbell accomplished in Ames and what he thought could be accomplished by Campbell with the new program here at Penn State. Alec, we appreciated you then. We appreciate you now. As we anticipated, major exodus from Ames in that 2025 roster, and many of them have found their second home, or in some cases, third and fourth homes at the college level here in State College.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me back on again. A lot of fun to be able to talk with you. Hopefully your listeners and your readers enjoyed my perspective and didn't, hate it, because clearly they didn't hate it too much because I'm back. But yeah, it was a mass exodus from Iowa State over to Penn State. To be quite frank with you, Tyler, I don't know if I expected there to be roughly 20 plus kids go from Iowa State to Penn State, but that's coming from someone who maybe wasn't fully aware of what Penn State's roster situation was going to be in terms of players graduating, declaring for the NFL draft as early entries, and then just the total number of outgoing transfers. I don't know if I anticipated it to be as high as it was, but once I learned more about that, it started to make more sense that so many players from Iowa State's roster are starting to follow Matt Campbell to Happy Valley, because some of them are going to be starters and impact players like Rocco Becht and Ben Bramer, who I'm sure we're going to talk about on the offensive side of the ball. But then I think others are going to be contributors that he knows he can rely on to be good culture pieces, rely on to be contributors, I guess you could say, kind of in the two deep. So I think a lot of these additions that he's made do kind of make some sense, but I think big picture will be interesting to see in his eyes, like, how does their talent acquisition efforts evolve and change as his tenure at Penn State exists over the long term?
We have been so focused here at Lions 24/7 and here in State College on what Matt Campbell is bringing in, not so much about how he's going about it. And I think that we are also fixated a bit on what James Franklin is bringing in down at Virginia Tech, especially when it comes to Penn State players. And there's been several of them, Ethan Grunkemeyer, quarterback, among the latest. And it's very different situations, whereas Penn State parted ways with James Franklin in a very ugly moment after 3 consecutive losses. I don't think there was a lot of love lost in that space of time between the two parties. When you look at Ames and the departure for Matt Campbell, I mean, you have the athletic director gushing about Campbell's impact and how they would have loved to have kept them. And Campbell's introductory press conference here in State College, he's gushing about his time at Iowa State and how difficult it was to leave the Cyclones. So very different there, but both coaches are gutting their former rosters and making life a little more difficult for the next coaching staff. So how is that reality being met right now on campus at Iowa State, as you see all of these promising players and established starters leaving town and joining forces with Campbell here in Happy Valley?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think a lot of people here felt like if Matt Campbell were to ever leave Iowa State in the current setup of college football, that he wouldn't burn the program down on its way out. Like, that was a phrase that was commonly used. And I think now a lot of people feel like with how many guys have entered the transfer portal, I think it's more than 50 at Iowa State at this point, close to 55. And the number of them that have followed him to Penn State, that he has burned it down on the way out. I don't think, though, that it's possible to experience a coaching transition in the 2026 calendar timeline, and that coach not quote unquote burn it down on the way out, right? Like there's too much roster transition that happens now for every program in the country in the offseason. And some of the additions that you're going to make in the portal or via the high school ranks are just people that you need to have to fill out a roster, and people that you can rely on to be good pieces in your locker room and help you establish and hold the culture that you would like it to be at. At the same time, you need people that can be impact players. And I think Campbell's bringing some guys like that with him to Penn State. I think he's bringing guys with him to Penn State that frankly are a little bit surprising to me, because I don't think they're guys who I would consider to be top of the depth chart type of contributors for a team that probably would like to compete at the top of the Big Ten or for a Big Ten championship next season, if at all possible. So I think some people feel like he's burned it down, but like I said, I don't feel like you can't burn a place down on your way out now. Like you're going to bring your coaching staff with you, and for the most part, the people that you want to have come with you are going to have that opportunity. Players themselves, they don't commit to schools, they commit to coaches. That's just the reality of it in almost every case now. And those kids want to follow their coach when that opportunity is provided to them. And I think what you've seen at Penn State, what you've seen at Virginia Tech, what you've seen locally here for Iowa State fans is all of that, right? Like Penn State players have followed James Franklin to Blacksburg to play for Virginia Tech. Matt Campbell has taken a lot of players from Iowa State to Happy Valley. And then, of course, Jimmy Rogers is doing the same thing from Washington State to Iowa State. I just think that's kind of the nature of the beast right now. I think that people are angry to a degree, right? Or they're upset, emotional. They feel like Matt Campbell's betrayed them because he has taken so many guys with him. But I think it's one of those deals where like it's an open wound, and over time they'll realize and learn to remember and appreciate Matt Campbell fondly if their hearts aren't in that spot right now.
I'm remembering what was eloquently phrased by Deion Sanders as bringing your own luggage to a new campus as a coach. And yeah, we're seeing that happen. And I don't know how much of it is Louis in this case. We'll find out when we get into some game action. But I do know that it's a deep list, and we're going to bounce around a bunch of different positions with you here, because you had up close looks at these guys in practice action and game action from, in some cases, from when they showed up to campus to when they left campus. And so, Alec, we have to start with the marquee name. That would be Rocco Becht. More than 9,000 passing yards, more than 60 touchdown passes as a 3-year starter for Iowa State. Penn State was not alone in trying to get him to campus through the transfer portal this winter. We know there were power conference contenders who were circling around this kid, thought he could be a fit to finish out his career for them, but very difficult to ignore that connection between him and not just Matt Campbell, but offensive coordinator Taylor Mauser and quarterbacks coach Jake Waters, who were both with him at Iowa State. And so now that he is officially on board with Penn State's 2026 plan, what can you tell us what you learned about Becht, the good, potentially some weaknesses, and ultimately why you think this could be a really important piece for Matt Campbell to build around year one?
Yeah, I think Rocco Becht's a winner in the most direct terms, and I think that's something that you want to bring in at the quarterback position. I think he's going to be a culture setter for Penn State. I'm used to him being a Cyclone, so I'm sorry for the tongue twister there. He's going to help Matt Campbell establish a culture that he wants. He's a winner. He's clutch in the fourth quarter. Back in 2024, he led, I think, 6 game-winning drives or fourth quarter comebacks. This year, he battled a shoulder injury that also concluded his AC joint. That led to him really struggling, I would say, for the latter half of the season. And I think that's why you saw his production decrease, along with the fact that he lost to day 2 NFL draft picks at receiver Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll, who both ended up at the Houston Texans, who are still in the NFL playoffs, of course. But I think what you're getting in Rocco Becht is someone who you can rely upon when healthy and with people around him to be someone who can potentially pass for 3,000 yards, potentially pass for 20 to 25 touchdowns. I think your interception numbers are probably going to be pretty close to 8 to 11, somewhere within that range. But I think one thing he brings you, if you're a Penn State fan, is just a voice that you're going to believe in, right? Like quarterback play, so much goes into what defines being a good quarterback. You obviously have to have the physical talents. You have to have the mental capabilities to see and process the field and make the right decisions. But you also have to have the right personality and the right kind of makeup to walk into a huddle and make people listen to you and believe in you. And that extends to a locker room and really an entire coaching staff as well. And Rocco Becht has that. It's something that stuck out to me early on in his tenure as Iowa State starting quarterback back in 2023. It continued throughout his entire tenure at Iowa State. He'll take accountability. He's happy to take the blame. He understands the responsibility that comes with playing quarterback. So those are all things that I would view as positives. In terms of his talent on the field, I'm not going to sit here and say that he has the physical talents of someone like Drew Aller or Ethan Grunkelmeyer, right? Like, he wasn't a top 247 prospect coming out of high school. He doesn't have the ability to make every single throw across the field. He doesn't have the greatest arm strength, but he's got an ability to kind of make plays. He extends plays with his legs. He understands when to kind of pull and run. He'll be aggressive and sometimes try and feed a ball into a tight window. And when he has the pass catchers, they'll generally make that play for him or with him. So is Penn State getting the next coming of Julian Sayin or Bryce Underwood or CJ Stroud in the Big Ten? They're not getting that. Like, there's more talented quarterbacks who entered the portal that Penn State could have gone after, but they're getting someone who's going to probably help Matt Campbell establish his culture and establish the way that he wants things to go, and he knows how to run the offense, and this will be his fourth year running the offense that Matt Campbell has employed. So I think those are all reasons to be bullish and positive on what he can do. I think that you obviously want him to get healthy and be a full participant in the spring if possible, because he's a tough kid. He played through those injuries with a brace on his left shoulder, never came out public that he was dealing with those specific injuries, did say he was hurt, but wouldn't get too into detail on what it was. It's a good addition. And like I said, I think the best way to describe him is he's a winner. I know Pete Thamel had reported this when he entered the portal, that he's the winningest quarterback in college football entering 2026. That's something that I would be pretty excited about if I'm a Penn State fan, and I'm not even a guy who likes the QB win stat.
Let me ask you, I mean, I've had a lot of people, significant amount of people, I should say, in the last couple of weeks here at Penn State. In fact, a couple from beyond campus here who just cover things nationally, and they said, get ready to be reminded of Trace McSorley. That's kind of been like the general gist. And when I think of McSorley, who I got a chance to cover for a few years here in State College, I think of just a fiery guy, someone who could look at anybody, defense, offense, help get them fired up, help get them on track in the game, and someone that a lot of guys would look toward in crunch time and know, hey, he's got it. He's going to be able to help us, give us a chance. Do you have any anecdotes you can pass along from Rocco Becht and maybe some moments of duress or moments of panic for the team where you saw him really galvanize things?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely moments where I think of, people saying that he would come over to the offensive line before a game-winning drive or the offense back in the 2024 season, and he just had a confidence about him that rallied the offense and made them believe. In terms of like just his toughness and making guys believe, and I think want to play for him, earlier this year, in 2025, Iowa State's first loss of the season, and went on the road to play at Cincinnati right before halftime. He took an absolutely like vicious hit. Like, it was like everyone in the press box was like, oh, geez. He was on the ground, got help to the sideline. I think he missed one play, came back in, and gets Iowa State into a position to score a touchdown right before the half. He's such a tough kid, and I think that type of stuff like breeds confidence in an offense. It makes teammates want to step up and believe that what you can do as a quarterback will help the team win. A similar instance happened in the 2024 Big 12 championship game. He was a victim of a targeting penalty against Arizona State, probably the most violent hit that he took in his time at Iowa State, and got right up, missed the rest of that drive, but the game had already been decided at that point. He still returned, and he finished the game for Iowa State. And then going off the field inside of AT&T Stadium, he's the last one down the tunnel because he's giving high fives to every single one of his teammates. He's that type of person. Like, he's everything you want in a kid that's going to wear the C on his chest. And like, I fully expect him to get that honor from his teammates or from Iowa State's outgoing staff now at Penn State. He just has all the personality traits you want in a quarterback. And like I said, he isn't the most physically talented kid. He's not 6'4". He's not 220 pounds, but he's going to have all of the moxie and like the type of it factor that you want. I don't know if he's someone who's the fiery leader that maybe you described Trace McSorley as, but he's someone who certainly leads with his voice and certainly leads with his actions at the same time.
I think you got some people excited out there who are listening and watching about what that might look like from a demeanor standpoint, from a captain standpoint, because this is a team that does have kind of a reset culturally inside its locker room about who are those voices that need to be heard, and he's going to be one of them. So not only did Matt Campbell and Taylor Mauser go and bring the current QB1 from Iowa State, but they also snagged seemingly the QB of the future for the Cyclones in Alex Mansky, who was a true freshman this past year, a little bit of game action, preserved his redshirt status, and he's someone that this current staff is quite high on. And this is a quarterback collection that has changed a lot. All 4 scholarship guys in the 2025 roster are no longer on campus. So Mansky could very well be the next man up here as QB2 and maybe as the starter in 2027. We got a long way to go before we get to that point. But can you tell us kind of the general profile on Alex Mansky as a young quarterback, as you learned at Iowa State?
Yeah, so he played 3A high school football in the state of Iowa. There's 5 classes in the state. He played at Algona High School, played with another kid who ended up going to school to play football at Iowa State, edge rusher Jack Limbaugh. But the jump that Alex Mansky took between his junior and senior year with Algona was pretty impressive. During his junior season, their offensive line just didn't play very well. So he's forced to make a lot of plays kind of out of structure. And forced to kind of use his athleticism, and he's a pretty good athlete. But he didn't get an opportunity to just like stand in the pocket and throw it very much. But then during the first half of his senior season, for the first 6 to 8 games, their offensive line played really well. He was able to stand in the pocket, make throws downfield, kind of show an ability to use his arm talent that way. And then he also still has the playmaking ability with his legs that he displayed a lot as a junior. So I think he does bring some dual threat ability. He's a kid who grew up playing baseball. He has the ability to throw it from the creative arm angles that we see in a lot of different quarterbacks as they develop into college passers or NFL quarterbacks. I think that's something that would be exciting. He is a guy who was, I believe, a 4-star composite prospect coming out of high school. One thing that I find really interesting about him, his senior season was cut short at Algona because he had a partially torn UCL in his right throwing shoulder. Your UCL is the ligament that baseball players and pitchers get surgery on all the time, their Tommy John surgery. Mansky's was just partially torn, had to get surgery for it, did go through rehab, but he was ahead of schedule through all of that. They didn't anticipate to have him in 2025 spring practices at Iowa State. He wasn't ever like a full participant in those, but he was able to throw off to the side. I think he did get a little bit more action in that than they maybe had expected in his first semester of the season, or first semester of college football. And then in the fall, he actually ended up being Iowa State's backup quarterback. Part of that may have been due to injury to Connor Moberly, who had been Iowa State's quarterback in the 2024 season. But Mansky is supremely more talented than Connor Moberly. I'm someone who's bullish on what Mansky can accomplish. I know that Iowa State staff, when he was here, felt really confident in what he could accomplish. And now I can feel comfortable saying that, like, I think he can develop into a Big Ten caliber starting quarterback. Colin Klein, the new head coach at Kansas State, was in love with him when he was a prospect. Klein recruited him to Kansas State when he was the OC of the Wildcats. He then got the offensive coordinating job at Texas A&M, and he pushed hard to try and get him to A&M, took a visit or two down there into SEC country. I know Michigan poked around interest in Alex Mansky a little bit. Minnesota's another school in the Big Ten that did as well. So he does have some Big Ten pedigree in terms of schools showing interest in him, SEC pedigree in Texas A&M, and Colin Klein showing interest in him. But he's a kid who's got a lot of arm talent, really good athlete. Like I said, played baseball growing up as well. Someone who I think can be that level of a player and that level of a passer if he continues to develop. And I think another year of development will be key for him. Here in Iowa, when Beck decided to leave, there was a lot of debate and consternation of, should they roll with Alex Mansky? Should they try and keep him, or should they go to the portal and try and bring in a different kid? They end up going to the portal, getting Jalen Rayner. Mansky ends up leaving for the portal, of course, before committing to Penn State. And I think Iowa State made the right decision probably for 2026, but I think big picture, long term, there's reason to believe that Alex Mansky has a pretty high ceiling.
Good intel there on Mansky, who has 4 years of eligibility and coming to State College. And additionally, based on what you told us, this is his first full healthy offseason. in a little bit, especially at the college level. So we'll see what he can accomplish here, kind of in the lab, as they say, during these winter months and then into the offseason as well once spring ball is finished. Hopefully we get a look at him in March and April, throwing the ball around with Becht on the practice field with some of our coverage at Lions 24/7. Sticking in the backfield and looking at second team all Big 12 running back Carson Hansen. He's a guy who has 21 total touchdowns the last couple of seasons. This past fall, 950 rushing yards, more than 5 yards per carry. And he is a guy that, has seemingly had that linear development at Iowa State. Year 1, year 2, year 3, the numbers improve, his snaps grow. And so what does Penn State add at running back? Because we've been accustomed to it being the same two guys for the last 4 years, and Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. Hansen, one of 2 transfer portal pickups, along with Ohio State's James Peoples. Peoples is a junior, Hansen is a senior. So give us the breakdown as best you can.
Yeah, Hansen's someone who, like you said, had kind of a linear career development, I would say. As a freshman, he played, I think, in all 12 or 13 of Iowa State's games. I'd have to go back and check my notes on that, but he played in an overwhelming majority of the games, but didn't get a ton of carries in those opportunities for Iowa State. He was probably their 4th running back, but he did block a good bit, contributed on special teams as well. As a sophomore, he experienced a real breakout. I don't want to describe him as like a power back, but he kind of does a good job of like getting dirty yards, falling forward. He doesn't rush negatively for very many opportunities, and I think that's one of the reasons why you saw him run for 13 touchdowns during his sophomore season. He wasn't nearly as productive as a scoring threat during his junior year with Iowa State, but he probably had a better overall year just running the football if you ignore the touchdown production. Rushed for a career high in yards. I think it was just over 950. And he still got in the end zone about 6 or 7 times on the year. So I think he's someone who can be a rotational type back for Penn State. He was never like their quote-unquote bell cow here. He split carries with Abu Sama the last couple of years. Sama has transferred to Wisconsin to play for Luke Fickell and the Badgers. So I don't think he's going to be, a guy who you give it to for 3 downs on every single series. I think you would expect him to probably split some of that share with James Peoples, the Ohio State back that you mentioned, transferring in. But I do think, all things being considered, like he's a productive addition. I think he's capable of being a Big Ten capable running back. I think he can fit into that mix with Peoples and potentially someone else that they've retained or someone else that they're bringing in from the high school ranks. I think he's capable of doing that. Nate, He doesn't have great speed either. Like I would add that. Like he's not someone who's super fast. He's not going to like separate from defenses. And he's not someone who's going to run through people. Like he's not insanely physically talented. Like he's not Katron Allen or Nick Singleton, but he's a good back. He's a productive college back.
And Hansen's last few games in an Iowa State uniform, as it turns out, 152, 113, 108, 120, 111 yards on the ground in those last 5 games. I think it will be an adjusted role, as you kind of referenced there, Alec, where he's the bell cow with Iowa State, getting 25 or so carries per game there down the stretch in Big 12 action. He is going to share it. Peoples is involved. So is Quentin Martin Jr., who's a redshirt sophomore, ran for 100 yards in the Pinstripe Bowl. Cam Wallace this year is a redshirt junior. So there's been some roster attention, but certainly a guy that warrants a lot of attention considering the production that he brings and the staff that he has already worked with at Iowa State. Now, when I look at the 2025 Iowa State depth chart at tight end, all 3 of those top guys are now here at Penn State. Now, they got to make some room for Andrew Rappleyea, who's a 4th-year tight end. Penn State was really emphasized on keeping him on campus. They were able to do that. They've had some guys leave at tight end. But what can you break down in terms of 1, 2, 3, all these guys? Can you give us the lowdown on these tight ends? Because clearly Taylor Mauser, who's not just the offensive coordinator, he's the tight ends coach. He really was a fan of what he had cooking in Ames because he pretty much relocated it here to Happy Valley.
Yeah, get ready for 13 and 14 personnel in certain packages, which I think Penn State fans will like. Like they got a good lineage of tight ends that goes well beyond Tyler Warren. So they may like the 13, 14 personnel. We'll go one by one here. Ben Bramer is the best pass catcher. He's certainly the most talented of the transfer tight ends that Penn State's bringing in. He was a freshman All-American back in 2023. He's got good speed, capable route runner, good kid, not super vocal. He's a little bit more quiet. So you don't expect to get a ton of interesting quotes out of him. But he had an injury during his sophomore year in 2024 that limited him, and that's why his production kind of decreased. But he was healthy again in 2025. He did experience like a pretty scary injury situation. I forget exactly who the opponent was. I think it was Kansas. Yeah, it would have been Kansas. He got hit on a ball over the middle. It was not the best decision by Becht. I mean, it was, I don't like using this phrase, but it was a hospital ball. And he just ran right into a defender and it knocked him pretty good. And he got up to try and walk off the field after sitting on a knee for a second. And he just collapsed, which is really, really scary, obviously. Ended up getting rushed to a local medical center where he, of course, was treated. He was ended up being released later that day. So it ended up not being anything too serious. He returned the next week in Iowa State's game at TCU, and he had a touchdown. So that's obviously a really quick turnaround from a really scary situation. But Bramer's definitely the most talented of the additions that Penn State's bringing in from Iowa State at the tight end spot. Gabe Burkle, someone that I would be pretty bullish on, though. I've always liked Burkle, particularly dating back to like the middle part of the 2024 season. Because Bramer went down with a knee injury that I think was sustained in Iowa State's win over UCF, Burkle started to receive more opportunity as a pass-catching target, and he really excelled. I think he had almost 300 yards receiving in the final 6 or 7 games of that 2024 season. He had his first career touchdown against Miami in the Pop-Tarts Bowl that Iowa State won. And then entering 2025, I felt like Iowa State had a really good duo with Bramer and Burkle at the top of the room. And they really got that. I mean, Burkle had about 25 to 30 catches. I think he had about 300 receiving yards again, maybe only 1 or 2 touchdowns, but he was a good 1-2 punch with Bramer. The two of them were pretty reliable. Burkle's more gifted as a blocker. He's more big-bodied and wide compared to Bramer, who's more long, I guess you could say, and maybe a little bit more wiry, where Burkle's just got a wider natural frame. I like him, and I think he's a good addition. Third addition is out with Tyler Moore.
That's Alexander. What's hold on, I'll get
Cooper Alexander.
Cooper Alexander. Yeah. Sorry, there's only like 20 names here to struggle for.
Inside baseball guys, we were talking. I was like, I got to pull the list up in front of me because I don't remember everyone who's gone. Cooper Alexander, someone who did not play a lot for Iowa State during his 2 years in Ames. 2024 though, got hurt early in the year. I believe first game of the season he got hurt. Ended up knocking him out for the year. I think it was a knee injury. So that's why his first season didn't end up materializing into anything. But he had a really good camp for them in 2024. They were bullish on the type of player that he could be for them. 2025, because of the depth of the tight end room with Bramer and Burkle ahead of him, he never really got a huge opportunity to get on the field for Iowa State. I think he only had a handful of catches on the year. But his high school tape coming out of Oklahoma, he was a really good pass catcher, good athlete. He's kind of got the more like natural wide frame that I described for Burkle. I don't think he's nearly as tall as Burkle or Bramer, so he doesn't have that gift. But good pass catcher, good athlete. Someone who's obviously a little bit more green or raw in terms of his college production, but someone who I think can develop into, a contributor at that level. Someone who I think the staff was really high on. Someone who I think that they were bullish on his ability to become a potential high-level contributor for Iowa State when that staff was here. So those are 3 additions. I don't know how much you would expect Alexander to play, depending on what the rest of that depth chart looks like at Penn State. But Bramer and Burkle are both going to receive a lot of snaps for them next season.
Yeah, Burkle, more than 50 career catches in his own right. Bramer, of course, really impressive as a receiver for Iowa State. He was like the aforementioned Carson Hansen at running back. He was a second-team all-conference selection in 2025. And again, I do expect Andrew Rapplier to remain on the field a bunch, and I think him and Bramer are probably your top 2 guys. But bring that 13 personnel, get Burkle on the field, and we'll see what the younger tight ends can do, because there's a couple of them here for Penn State already that are some homegrown talents. Over at wide receiver, it's another spot where we've seen several guys come over to Penn State's transfer class, 4 of them in total. 2 of them were key components for the pass attack at Iowa State last season. You look at Sowell and you look at Brett Eskelsen. Those 2 guys last year, both over 30 catches. It wasn't a big gaudy numbers for wide receivers. I think that you had Sowell had the highest catches with 32 of them, and Eskelsen had like the highest yards with about 550 of them. But both had really impressive averages. put up kind of gains in bunches and bring some really interesting traits to the field. Again, moving over with their former position coach, Noah Pauley, familiarity in place, working with the quarterback who sent them those passes last season, and Rocco Becht, with the same offensive coordinator and same head coach. So it should be relatively seamless. That's got to be beautiful for Chase Sowell, who has now been on 4 different college rosters during his career, Colorado to East Carolina to Iowa State, now to Penn State. Sowell is a guy who has been back-to-back cycles now evaluated as a 4-star talent by 24/7 Sports. I know he's a top 100 overall guy in the transfer portal for us right now on our website. But don't overlook Eskelsen, who's coming off a 5-touchdown season as a sophomore. What can you talk about these two guys a little bit separately, and then maybe how they complement each other?
Yeah, so with Sowell, I do think the background on the 4 schools is valuable. So he started his career at Colorado, and he was there in Carl Durrell's last season, the year they went 1-11, and they were just like the worst team in the country. And then Deion Sanders came in, he got cut essentially. So then he went to East Carolina, had 2 productive seasons with the Pirates, and then kind of moved back up to the Power Conference level to play for Iowa State. Like you said, had a fairly productive season, 32 catches, 500 yards, a couple touchdowns. But he did have some issues with inconsistency. He had too many drops this past season. I don't remember how many. That's something that I would monitor if I was you or if I was a Penn State fan, is just where he's at confidence-wise, catching the football, how consistent he is catching the football. Eskelsen is someone who's interesting, though. Eskelsen is from Texas. He's from a Iowa State legacy family. He's got good speed on the outside. Iowa State like to use him as a deep ball threat. At least once this year, he had a opening play from scrimmage catch go for at least 75 yards. I think one went for a touchdown. I think one went for a little bit further, or one went for a huge chunk gain. So that's obviously an exciting way to start a game. That's something Taylor Mauser likes to do. You guys will probably learn that pretty early. If they feel like they've got to tell, he'll throw it deep on the first play from scrimmage. That'll get people going, especially at Penn State, where they didn't do that a lot under the previous staff or any of those offensive coordinators. So be ready for that, Penn State fans. That being said, Eskelsen's someone who I actually think can mature into a pretty good player for them. I would be more bullish on him being like a big time player for them than Sowell, to be honest with you. I was really high on Sowell coming into Iowa State last year, and I thought he would be their number 1 wide receiver. And I mean, he pretty much did turn into that. I mean, he led the team in receptions by a wide receiver, was second on the team in yards, I think, by a wide receiver. But it was Eskelsen who had more yards. He had more touchdowns. Eskelsen's probably the one who I would have ranked in the top 100 of available transfers, not Sowell, if I was the one deciding between the two. I think Eskelsen can mature into a good player. I mean, he's not a superstar, right? He's not going to be any of the guys that Ohio State has had over the last several years under Ryan Day and under Brian Hartline, but he's a good player. He's fast. He's got reliable hands. Fun personality to engage with. He's always got talking with a smile. He'll tell good stories. I'd be pretty excited about him. The other 2 guys that they brought in, Zay Robinson, he's from the Des Moines area. He didn't play a ton this year for Iowa State as a true freshman. Did get in on special teams a little bit, may have gotten a few offensive snaps. I know that they really like his athleticism. He's a really quick kid, agile kid. You get the ball to him in space, he's going to make people miss. That's someone who I think long-term can mature into someone if he's able to be healthy. He really struggled with injuries throughout high school. He fractured his shoulder blade or something crazy, I believe, his junior year, experienced some various soft tissue injuries during his senior year as well. But good kid, good story. Someone who, like I said, if you get the ball to him in space, that's exciting. Karan Brookins was a name that they added that I was pretty interested in. Kind of it piqued my interest, I guess, when they added him, because I didn't think he was going to go to Penn State. That's one that I didn't think they would add. He's long, he's big, but he didn't play at all during his freshman season at Iowa State. So that's another reason why I was I'm intrigued why they added him. He's from the New Jersey area. That might have something to do with it. You kind of need to be able to fill out a depth chart and have a scout team. It's possible that he ends up being better than that. We never got to see practice, so I don't know too much of the way he performed in practice. But he was more of an unknown, right? He didn't have a ton of offers coming out of high school. I don't know how many other power conference offers he had coming out. It may have just been Iowa State and maybe Rutgers, if I remember correctly. So he's a little bit more of an unknown. He was a name that I was more intrigued by them adding. Because like Eskelton made sense. Like Sowell kind of makes some sense as long as they're able to look past the drop issues. And I think if Sowell can put the drop issues behind him, like I think he can be a reliable possession guy. And if Eskelton's able to mature as he enters what I think should be a true junior season for them in 2026, he's someone who I think can take a step forward and grow upon his 525, 550 yards or whatever it was and get that up closer to 700, 800, and maybe get closer to 40 or 50 catches or whatever it may be.
Edskelson, some serious speed as well. Like you mentioned,
Yeah,
multiple years of eligibility for him ahead. Sowell is down to his final year of college eligibility. And because I do feel like you poured some cold water on Sowell, and he's a guy that a lot of Penn State fans have been excited about. I want to follow up on this because
he's good. He's good.
Yeah.
He just needs to be more consistent. Like he has to be more consistent catching the ball. I would need to go look at his PFF numbers again and see how many drops he was hit with. He was someone that Iowa State fans were really excited about adding as well. I just don't know if he met those expectations. And if you fix the drop issue, like I think he's going to be a pretty good player. Like it makes sense why they added him. I just don't think that he's going to come in and be like an all Big Ten first or second team receiver, I think is what I would say. Like, I don't know if his production met the expectation that people had laid out for him at Iowa State this past season.
Well, and I wanted to follow up on that because I had gone back through some of your reporting and I've obviously, done some homework on Sowell and where he's coming to campus at this stage of his career. And I noticed through the first, I believe it was 5 games last year, he averaged, or this past season, he was right around 26 snaps per game on average. The next 7 games of the season that closed things out, he was at like 46 snaps per game. So, I mean, he essentially doubled his involvement in this offense during Big 12 conference play. He's also a guy that in the last 8 games had 6 catches of 30-plus yards. The first 4 games of the season, which included some cupcakes, no catches, 1 or 2 catches, minimal yards. But then I remembered preseason injury, spring ball, he's banged up. How much was that kind of part of the 1-year body of work for him at Iowa State? The fact that he didn't really get to put together a full preseason camp. He didn't really get to put together a full season due to some injury limitations, maybe impacting his role offensively. Is there room for his ceiling to get higher with this same offensive coordinator, with this same receivers coach, if he can stay healthy during his time at Penn State?
Yeah, I think there's reason for that to potentially be a belief or a reason to be bullish on him. You made a good point about him getting hurt in the spring. You made a good point about him getting dinged up in the fall. That was one thing that the staff mentioned a lot early in the season, like you said, with his snap share kind of increasing as the second part of the season matured. He definitely received greater opportunity, I would say, as he started to learn and grasp the offense a little bit more. So I think if he's able to stay healthy, if he's able to be a little bit more consistent, he's someone who can be a reliable contributor for them. He should have good rapport with Rocco Beck, but like I said, I pulled up his PFF numbers. I mean, 6 drops, that's pretty frustrating. In the last 4 games, he had 3 total drops, 1 in 3 of the last 4 games. So that's certainly something that's a little bit concerning. I know that if you can kind of clean that up a little bit, you'd feel pretty comfortable about him contributing. And just looking in past years of his career, 2024, 6 drops, 2023, 6 drops as well. And I think he had to get off-season surgery, if I remember correctly, after this past season at Iowa State, but I don't know if that's for certain. I think he did. Don't know how serious that was, but to me, it all goes back to, and I know I keep saying this, his ability to consistently catch the ball. If he does that, I think he's someone who Penn State fans should be really excited about adding. You just want to make sure that he's able to catch the ball. I mean, that's your number one job as a receiver.
Let's get over to some big fellas, because in the trenches, Penn State has some holes to fill across its 2 deep on the offensive front. Trevor Burr is a guy who had starting experience at guard last year for Iowa State. He's one of 4 pickups on the offensive line from the Cyclones 2025 roster. A guy that we talked about earlier this week with Tyler Calvaruso, Brock Riker out of Texas State, is going to come up and compete for the center job this year. But among those Iowa State guys, maybe starting with Burr, can you break down what your expectations are based on what you have witnessed from them in Ames, and who do you think could realistically go out and claim a high-level spot on the Nittany Lions O-line?
Yeah, they love Trevor Burr. They love him a lot. Really physical kid. He matured into a starting role for Iowa State during the 2025 season. He missed, I think, the first 3 games because he was diagnosed with mono, like the week or 2 before their week 0 game against K-State. So that's why he didn't play early in the year, but he had a really good season for Iowa State playing left guard for the Cyclones. I would imagine he plays a similar position for Penn State this upcoming season. Ryan Clanton loves him. Penn State's new offensive line coach. They're bullish on what he can provide them long term. So that's an addition that I would expect to probably start for Penn State. The other additions are all younger, correct? Like Vea Ikalua is that one that I think kind of came in there. They're high on him too. They flipped him late in the 2025 recruiting class. He was previously committed to Stanford. He's from out west. Big kid. Like, he's a big kid. And bigger than an offensive lineman than Iowa State was typically getting. They spoke about as highly of him as you can remember a young offensive lineman. I think he's capable of turning into a potential star if their words about him end up being accurate and fair representations of the type of player that he can be. Like, they spoke as highly of him as just about anyone. Physical kid, strong kid, probably projects to play one of the two guard positions as he kind of matures and gets to the point where he needs to in his career. And then Qual is another one that they added, if I remember correctly. I would say
Qual, and then it's Qual and Will Tompkins are the two others.
Tompkins, okay. Yeah, so I'm going Qual. Qual didn't play for Iowa State at all this season, but they flipped him away from the Ryan Walters disaster that was at Purdue for 2 seasons. A good addition for them. Like, they were excited to flip him. I think he was a composite 4-star prospect coming out in that recruiting class. So big kid. He projects to be more of a tackle, probably needs at least another year or two of seasoning. Tompkins is an interesting one too. He was an in-state addition for Iowa State's staff in the 2025 class. I believe he's from Cedar Rapids. He suffered a knee injury, I believe in the spring or the summer before last season, and that limited him throughout camp. So I don't know how much he was able to contribute or even get active in practice throughout his first season at Iowa State, but he was a good recruiting win for them. He was a kid who I was bullish on coming out of high school. I thought he was a good leader, kind of set the foundation for what they want at offensive line. I like that addition for Iowa State, and I think that's one at tackle, along with Qual, that they can be pretty excited about. But of the young guys, Vea Ikalua is the one that they were most excited about within the program walls, I believe.
Yeah, well, they need guys that are ready now. They need guys to develop and get ready for later, and so they've got a blend of that here with this group coming over from Iowa State. A little bit more quiet on the defensive line. They've done a lot of their work with some guys from elsewhere: Colorado, Oklahoma State, Utah, UCLA coming to campus to impact the defensive line. But the one guy from that group at Iowa State that they've got on board to this point is Elijah Carnell, I should say. And I believe he was a 2-deep player for Iowa State, at least entering the season last year. What was his role like for the defense, and ultimately what does Penn State get? Because the defensive line has been a bit decimated by the transfer portal and by seniors leaving.
Yeah, he was a late add for them in the 2024 class. Comes from Bishop Gorman, that powerhouse out in Vegas. He's someone who they kind of, I think, felt pretty confident about during his freshman year. Felt like they may have found something there. Didn't play a ton of snaps for Iowa State this season. I think just about 25 or 30 snaps. A lot of those kind of, I think, started to come a little bit later in the season in 2024. But back in 2025, he played more consistently for them. Someone who probably is going to be in a different role depending on the scheme that Deanne Lynn runs for them defensively. I don't know if you guys have any intel on what he plans to do defensively. I imagine you're kind of in the woods on things like that, just like I am.
We're working through all sorts of stuff here, and that's definitely one of them.
It's not fun to try and have to figure out all this stuff. Like, it's fun, but it's really hard.
Yeah.
But with Carnell, he was someone who I feel like the staff felt like they maybe identified and felt like he could be a good add for them, someone who developed into a reliable contributor. I would probably project him to play more on the edge than on the interior, but he can maybe move on the inside. He had a number of pressures this season, not a ton, but like I said, he was just a second-year defensive lineman. Their defensive line development and recruiting, I think, had probably fallen off a little bit after Will McDonald turned into a first-round draft pick. Like, they just hadn't had that level of a difference maker again. I don't think Carnell was going to turn into that for Iowa State, and I don't think I would expect him to turn into that at Penn State, but he's someone who I would expect to play for them next season. I think he can at least be in that rotation.
Linebacker again, it reminds me of tight end
You're
a
getting the
little
whole
bit. You
room.
look, yeah, you look at the top group for Iowa State in 2025 and just say, okay, now that might be Penn State's top group. You throw in the Tony Rojas. We'll see if Alex Tash can get back healthy for Penn State. But there's going to be a lot of Iowa State influence at linebacker. Cooper Ebel was the top tackler for Iowa State last season. You had Bacon put together a really strong. I think he was close to the top, second or third on the team in tackles on the season. Caleb Bacon. And then Cale Brazina, another linebacker who I think was close to 30 tackles on the year in 2025. So again, I'm going to ask you to work through this trio, their respective individual traits that stand out. And I guess you've got to obviously probably begin with the guy who tied for the team leading tackles last year.
Yeah, so Ebel is someone who I think that they really liked. I thought he took a nice step forward for Iowa State in 2025, had a good year. 2024, he definitely played a good role for Iowa State. Tough kid. I believe he played through like a separated shoulder during the 2024 season. So that's obviously something you always like to hear out of your linebackers. Caleb Bacon is probably the one that Iowa State fans will miss the most. Obviously, the fun last name, right? He had some fun NIL deals out here that maybe he can carry over to Penn State, but he's more of your outside linebacker. Think of him as more of your edge rusher. He's probably a little bit more gifted as a pass rusher than Ebel is. I know he's ranked higher in our portal rankings than I think Ebel is, but Brazina is the one that I kind of like. I mean, that kid's stacked. Like, he's big, he's strong. One of the more physically impressive kids that you guys will probably stand next to that Iowa State's bringing, or that Penn State's bringing in from Iowa State. Kind of an interesting type deal here, right? Where as a freshman, I think he played more than Iowa State anticipated him playing because of a rash of injuries at linebacker. This year, he started the year in the rotation, kind of lost that job, but ended up getting it back later in the season. He'll enter a true junior season in 2026. I think Brazina is a pretty good player. In terms of the three that they added, like, his long-term upside is probably the highest just because he's not entering his final year of eligibility. Bacon is probably the one I would expect to see the most sack production out of if you're looking at it from that perspective. And then Ebel will be one of the most consistent contributors. Bacon was a captain for Iowa State in 2025, so that's another added leadership quality that you're also getting in addition to Rocco Beck. So you're getting a former captain for Iowa State on the offensive side and Beck and a defensive captain in Bacon. And I think that's valuable as well. But I think it'll be interesting to see how their roles change and evolve a little bit and what could potentially be a different defensive scheme.
I got a couple follow-ups on Bacon, and they don't involve his name, which, trust me, there's plenty of farms around here that could be very interested in branding with him. But I'm curious about him because right now there is a clear void for Penn State at edge rusher. Unless they go make some transfer portal moves and bring in someone who's proven it on a different college campus, they're going to be reliant on young talent and maybe getting outside the box from a position versatility standpoint, looking at that linebacker room. Bacon as an edge rusher, as a guy who can at least situationally rush the quarterback. You brought that up before I did. What stands out there? And then you also brought up his captaincy. What kind of a leader is he? What did you pick up from him on campus?
Yeah, so in terms of his pass rush ability, and I think you used it well when you said situationally. Like, I don't think you're going to see him, if they go to a four-man front, be like an overhanging outside linebacker that's rushing the passer on multiple snaps per series. But I think he's someone who can be a situational pass rusher, which I think is probably in his best suit in whatever scheme Penn State decides to run defensively. In terms of his captaincy, really accountable, right? Like, almost like too accountable. Like, if they lost and we talked to Bacon after the game, which is common to talk to captains, right? Like, he was good because you got the accountable stuff, but like, he took the blame for like things that was like not his fault, which is good, right? Like, you want that out of your captain and you want guys to be accountable. But if for our spot and our job, it's maybe not always the best to not get the full truth on what may have occurred or whatever. But good kid, we'll speak with a smile. Good fun story too. Like, started his career as a walk-on. He wore the number 26 at Iowa State the last two seasons. Well, in 2024, he suffered a knee injury in week one, but he wore the number 26, and that number means something at Iowa State. It's in honor of a former player who's battling a severe illness. So that shows what it means, right? Like, they don't just give that number out to anyone. I don't know if it's necessarily as like well known as 7 at LSU or 11 at Penn State. I probably should have gone there first, the 11 at Penn State. Maybe he gets the 11 at Penn State. I don't know. But he's someone who I think is a good kid, speaks with a smile, good leader, takes accountability, is aware that he's kind of got a fun story. And I think he's really grateful for everything that he's accomplished because he started his career as a walk-on from Lake Mills, Iowa.
Yeah, a young man by the name of LeVar Arrington II currently has the number 11.
I can't imagine
jersey.
he's going to get that. Said probably unlikely that Caleb Bacon wears 11 then.
I'm looking at the snap counts from last year defensively. You've got Ebel up over 650. So was Caleb Bacon. You've got Brazina over 320 snaps. And then the guy who led that entire group also coming to Penn State as we shift focus toward the defensive backfield. And I really like what they have kind of gathered from the Cyclones roster and bringing here to Happy Valley in the defensive backfield. Marcus Neal, almost 700 total snaps on defense. That was the leader on the Cyclones. He is making the move to Penn State. And you work your way through it. Jeremiah Cooper, who has some all Big 12 accolades in his history. And then Jamison Patton, another guy who was an integral figure for this defense last year. Almost 500 snaps at the safety spot. So I'm going to ask you to go through it again. Cooper, Patton, Neal, break it down for us.
Okay, I'm going to go in reverse order here.
Marcus, you can go whatever order you want.
Yeah, Marcus Neal is the player that I think Penn State fans should be the most excited that they landed. That kid's a superstar. It'll be interesting to see the type of role that he plays at Penn State. Again, depending on the scheme. He played the star in Iowa State's 3-3-5 scheme. So he kind of played like a hybrid, like safety linebacker type spot for Iowa State. Really good athlete. I mean, that kid packs a punch. He is built really well. Like, he's not the tallest, but he's compact. He hits hard. I really liked him when they added him out of high school. He was a late add for them. Good find out of the Kansas City area. When he entered the portal, I thought he would have a lot of interesting opportunities. I think Indiana contacted him, which that's actually a good program to have contact you now. And they like their safeties, and they do a good job of recruiting and developing over there under Curt Cignetti. He's a really good player. Like, he's a really, really good player. He's going to be a future NFL draft pick. And I know I haven't said that about a lot of these guys. Bramer, I think, will be one of those as well. But Neal is certainly going to be an NFL draft pick. That's one that I would be excited about. I'll be intrigued to see what his role is, but he's going to make an impact for Penn State for sure. And he'll be a true junior for them next year because he avoided a redshirt season for Iowa State in 2024. So that's probably the best addition they've made defensively. Jeremiah Cooper, he'll be coming off of an ACL tear. I wouldn't expect him to participate in the spring. He may not even participate in the summer. If I remember correctly, he tore his ACL during the first bye week, which I think was right after Iowa State played Arizona. Right before they went to play Cincinnati. That was during practices, if I remember correctly. So it'll be interesting to see what his availability is. I would also be intrigued to see what position he plays. So for the first 3 years of his career with the Cyclones, he played free safety. And then this year in 2025, they moved him to corner. And I think that move was twofold. One, they had plentiful depth at safety, and they were a little bit less gifted with their depth at corner. So they moved him. And I found that to be interesting. He had a fine start to the year in a different position. Some people will tell you that he's better suited to play corner at the next level if he's able to get there than he is free safety. He had a really good 2023, had 5 picks. His 2024 wasn't nearly as productive, and I know he was really disappointed with the way he played that season for Iowa State. And I think he felt better about the way he was playing in 2025. And then he popped the ACL, and that ended his season. Was able to still get the red shirt, right, in the medical red shirt, but I just don't know what his availability is going to be like this offseason. Like I said, I wouldn't anticipate him being available really for the spring. Maybe you get him back for training camp in some capacity. But I think he's someone who could start if he's healthy. It just maybe depends on what that looks like for him in terms of his rehab and recovery. And then Jamison Patton is one. That's another one where I don't want to say surprised. Like, to me, he's someone who I feel like can be a 2-deep type contributor for Penn State this upcoming year. I don't think I would expect him to start, but he can definitely contribute in rotational snaps for them. He's from the state of Iowa. Good kid, was a high school quarterback, really good athlete, so he understands the game well. High football IQ, I would say, as well. But I just don't think he's nearly as talented as Neal. Certainly not as productive as Cooper in the secondary at the same time.
It's a mixed bag in the defensive secondary for Penn State. All 4 top safeties from the 2025 season have moved on. The guys who started, all three of them at cornerback in the Pinstripe Bowl, they remain part of the program moving forward. Let's finish here, and we're going to go away from the players. And thank you so much for your fantastic breakdown of going through a bunch of this stuff with us. But we've mentioned a few different assistant coaches. Last time we spoke to you, it was really just Matt Campbell, and I think he had brought in maybe a couple of his first front office guys. We were still waiting to see who the assistant coaches were going to be that followed him over. It's the whole offensive staff, essentially. And then you've got Dion Broomfield, that safeties coach. Who would you say is the most entertaining conversation among these new assistant coaches? Because we're looking forward. I think, okay. And can I make a guess?
Yeah, my guess is you're going to guess correctly, but go ahead.
My guess is Ryan Clanton, the offensive line coach.
He's up there. No. He's good.
Okay.
It's Taylor Mauser. And it ain't even close. You guys are going to love your press availabilities with Taylor Mauser. Fun guy. Ask him about his favorite Pop-Tart flavor. Grew up a huge hockey fan. So as of like a couple of years ago, he was playing like rec league hockey. Like, he's an awesome dude. I'm going to miss covering him. Like, Mauser is an awesome guy. And he's been with Matt Campbell forever. I'll tell a fun anecdote. Fox Big Noon Kickoff was in Ames for their week 2 game against Iowa this past season. And this was Mauser's second year as Iowa State's offensive coordinator. Gus Johnson, the play-by-play guy, told a funny story. Mauser followed Campbell from Toledo to Iowa State, and now obviously to Penn State. But in his move to Iowa State, his girlfriend came with him from Toledo to Ames. And after a number of months or whatever, she said, yeah, I don't like it here. Like, it's me or it's Campbell. And he picked Campbell. So good for him. He ended up finding a wife in the central Iowa area. I believe they have at least 1 or 2 kids together. So he picked Matt Campbell over his girlfriend. She ended up leaving Ames or central Iowa altogether. I don't know where she is at, or who she is.
We got to track her down for a podcast.
Yeah, that's a good story. See if you can figure that out. But yeah, he's the most entertaining interview. Clanton's good. Clanton's great. Like, he'll love to get into like the football nitty gritty stuff. He likes violence. He likes physicality. So that's what I would expect on the offensive line. He developed Iowa State's first offensive line draft pick in more than a decade. Jalen Travis, who was a transfer addition for them from Princeton in the Ivy League. That was in the 2025 NFL draft. He went to the Indianapolis Colts. Had a couple NFL draft success stories, including a first rounder, Trevor Penning during his time in Northern Iowa. A name that I would tell you to know is Jackson St. Brown. I think he formally announced his addition at Penn State this week on social media. Clanton will give a ton of credit to Jackson St. Brown as like a support assistant on the offensive line. He thinks that he's going to be one of the great offensive line coaches in college football at some point in the future. So that's a name that I would certainly know or familiarize yourself with, or Penn State fans should become familiar with, because Clayton will mention it. I wouldn't be surprised if you hear Mauser and other offensive staff members mention it. Dion Broomfield, the defensive back safeties coach, someone who played at Iowa State, played in the NFL briefly, engaging personality. I think you guys will like talking to Coach Broomfield quite a bit as well. And then Noah Pauley, I don't know if you guys have had a chance to meet him.
Yeah.
Okay. He's short. So don't be blown away when he like walks in for that first press and you're like, that's not what I expected you to look like. He's not a very tall guy, but he's a very nice guy. Super polite. We'll certainly ask how you're doing, shake your hand, always has a smile on his face. It's a good group of people on the on-field assistants that I think you guys will enjoy interacting with, however much you're able to speak with them. But Mauser's certainly the most entertaining interview that you guys will get.
Yeah, I believe we'll get a chance in early February to really start to get some face-to-face interactions with these guys. Hopefully that continues through the remainder of the offseason. We'll really get to kind of build out some profiles for who they are from a personality standpoint, from a football coach aspect as well. But I think we all come away from this conversation with a much better understanding of what Penn State has added to its roster from Ames, from the 2025 Iowa State squad that you covered, and really appreciate it, man. I know that you've got your own coaching and roster turnover you're dealing with there, and a pretty fun basketball season for the most part as well. But you can catch Alec Bussey's work over at Cyclone Alert, and we really appreciate it. If there's anything we can do to reciprocate the favors you've done for us, just let us know here in Happy Valley. Alec, thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, no, thank you guys so much for having me. Good luck with all the former Cyclones. the Penn State Cyclones, as they're being called out here right now. So good luck to all those guys. They're all good people. You're going to enjoy covering them, and I hope Penn State fans enjoy watching them play because they're going to play hard for PSU.
Thanks, Alec. Appreciate him for joining us. Second time in about a month, and we'll break down this transfer portal class as it continues to come into focus. A lot of the heavy lifting has been done, but there are some things that we didn't get to on this podcast that have been happening over at Lions247.com, along with some recruiting movement that's starting to heat up. We're going to have campus visitors once again pretty soon here as the new staff tries to make their imprint on the recruiting trail. We'll bring that all to you next week with more episodes of the Lions 24/7 podcast. You don't have to wait until then, though, to get the latest in Nittany Lions coverage. Go over to Lions247.com. Still have our 50% off subscription deal going. It'll take you for an entire full year through 2026. You can be on board with us. Never miss any of the insider scoop. For now, stepping aside, big thanks again to Alec Bussey. I am Tyler Donahue, and this has been the Lions 24/7 podcast.